The last time I saw you interviewed, Simon, you were described as a polymath and the interview master. I know you've done like over 330 episodes of the Betting People. I think over 300. You met some fascinating people over those years. But in my research about you, I was thoroughly entertained and impressed with your own background. So I'm very much looking forward to this conversation and having you on the other side of the camera for once.
That's very flattering. Thank you, David.
No, absolutely, yeah. No, literally, I was laughing aloud at some of your anecdotes and very surprised. And I want to mention slaughterhouses and perfume factories and all this stuff, but we'll get onto that. So, like, as a youngster, what was your sort of first memory that you could actually bet on the horses or sport?
The Grand National. We weren't a racing or betting family at all, but the Grand National was a thing. My uncle Frank ran the post office in Rackenford, which is a little village, and they used to ring up and put your bets on with Uncle Frank, who was, I suppose, an illegal bookmaker, basically. But the first bet I actually really remember having was probably the worst bet known to man, and it was the FA Cup final in 1973, where Sunderland were playing Leeds. Now, I'd never really taken much notice of football before, but my dad and my uncles were all Arsenal fans, and Sunderland, who I think were near the bottom of the second division at the time, beat Arsenal in the semi-final. So they were all supporting Sunderland to beat Leeds for the final. Now, I knew absolutely nothing about football, but obviously betting, I did know something about betting because my next door neighbour, Neil Sharland, bet me an even 10p that Leeds would beat Sunderland. Now, looking back at it, I suppose Leeds were probably about 10 on or something, but I bet him an even 10p. I copped, but I also got knocked because he never paid. But that's the first actual bet I remember. But the Grand National was every year for us, but we weren't a betting family.
1973, you must have been about 5.
I was 8.
Okay, right, nice. I think that's the record. Most people are around 10, 12, 15, 8 record with that. So, and you've been a regular at the racecourse since the 80s. So I've heard you talk with immense passion about the joy you get from being on course. Is that still the case after all these years?
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. I first went, it was the Mackerson Gold Cup at Cheltenham in 1983. I was 18. The manager of our local pub, Dave Sims, he used to work for Racecourse Bookies. He didn't actually go in the end, but he was telling us all about it. He taught me tic-tac in the pub before I ever went racing. And I went that day. I can't remember anything that won, but I do remember being down in the betting ring and absolutely enthralled by it. It was just everything about it. It was lively in those days. There were floor men running around, people shouting tic-tacs. It was like, quite intimidating, actually, I imagine. But at 18, you're not intimidated, are you? You just get standing amongst it all. But that's what I remember, and I just loved it.
And so how long did it take to learn the tic-tac?
Well, I knew all the odds because we were going in the betting shop. Anyway, so I knew the odds. And then, to be honest with you, tic-tac is fairly straightforward. If you know that, if you know the prices, then it sort of follows. So it wasn't that difficult, but he taught me that.
Does it? I saw you. You got Nick Leeson to do some of the trading floor hand signals in your interview with him. Is there any crossover?
I can't remember now, but I don't remember thinking there was.
Okay.
To be honest with you, but I can't remember.
I'm tempted to get you to do some now, but so about your betting people. So it is over. Is it 300? You've done since they started. When did they start?
Well, the series is over 300. There's been other people that's done some as well. I haven't actually counted how many I've done. I probably get around the 300 mark. Started when I started working for Star Sports. I worked for them full time in 2017. I think they were running out of ideas for Ben. Ben basically gave me a job at Sympathy because I got made redundant by Turf TV. And it was a bit of a rocky old road because I don't think Ben offered me the job, but then I don't think they had a job for me, basically. So it was getting a little bit near the end of I was probably on borrowed time. And it started off, we went, because I've got the press accreditation, I was invited to the Sydney Arms in Chelsea to interview the Shergar Cup jockeys. So Ben said, "Well, go up there." He said, "But take your phone and just video them instead of it sort of doing a normal written interview." So I went there and did an interview with Hayley Turner, just holding the phone literally like that. not many people watched it, but then Ben said, right, get a tripod and go and do Neil Channing.
Yeah.
And Neil and Ben knew each other. And obviously Neil Channing, he's very easy to interview because you ask him a question. In fact, I didn't ask him any questions. He read the questions and then said, just point the camera at me and I'll answer them. So I just sat there and it got, I can't remember the amount of views, but it was an astonishing number of views because it was some of the bit new, you know. So then it was, right, we're going to go for this. And Ben's dream was a Wikipedia of the game, as he called it.
Yeah.
He spent a hell of a lot of money, you know, because it's not, you know, he pays me and we all the time for doing it. So, and that's pretty much what it has developed into, you know, $300, quite an archive. And when we're all gone, hopefully it will still be there. No, it's out there, you know. So I'm very proud to be part of it.
Yeah, you're the Joe Rogan of the betting industry. It's amazing. It's you've had some amazing guests, and I did watch the Channing one, and like you say, I was like, oh, where's Simon in this? I was like, I know, but he just gave the answer. So have you in the 300 or so you've done? Has there been one, without naming names, obviously, where you've just found it, because they all seem very fluid, very natural conversations. Betting people tend to be quite interesting people. Has there ever been one where you sort of feel like it's been a disappointing Tinder date where it's not quite what you expected?
I can honestly say I've never come away from any of the interviews thinking that someone was an absolute, you know. I'll mention his name, so I'm sure one of the most difficult one I did was Stephen Little. Now, I'd known Stephen for years. He's always been. He's a paradox. He on the racecourse, he used to wear his mink coat and he would scream the odds out. And he would, if you had 100 grand at a big festival meeting, he would take it off you in the late 80s, 90s. But he's actually quite a quiet, reserved man. Right. And he asked me to do an interview, if he could do an interview. Now, my old boss, Jack Lynn, always said he was the mystery man. No one knew how he got from where he started to where he became. So I was really looking forward to doing this interview with Stephen. Went to his place. He lives in like I won't say where it is, but it's a mansion basically. And I sat there and I had all these questions, and he just answered them, yes, no. You know, how did it feel when you know, these big punters bet with you? And he said, I knew one would win and one would lose, and then I got about 2 parts done because you try and do them in 15-minute parts. And I said, well, that's it, Stephen. You know, I took down all my stuff. And then he looked a bit deflated and he said, he said, I've got a book upstairs where I've written some of my favorite stories in. So I packed it all, put it all back up. I said, well, go and get it. So then he came, you know, he sort of came alive a bit and told me some of these anecdotes. And then I put it all together and it worked out really well. But that was the nearest it came to being like you say, a bit of a disappointment and he still hasn't told. There's still loads more to tell, and I've done him twice. He's still keeping some back.
Was he just uncomfortable on camera? Was that what it is? Or
I think he's just a very reserved man, and he wouldn't be, you know, you couldn't be more polar opposite to him than Neil Channing. So, you know, he sort of answered me in 1 or 2 word answers, which you've done plenty of interviews yourself. You know that you have to try and tease it out, you know. But I was quite inexperienced at that point, so. The second time I did him, I was ready for him. And I knew that's just how he is. So I was ready to keep needling away. But
and so on the flip side, has there been anywhere you felt, because you don't strike me as someone who suffers from nerves, but there must be some where you've been nervous because it was a high profile person? Is any standout like that?
Oh, blimey. Yeah, I must mask it well. I get nervous every single time I'm going to do an interview, and I really do. It's like I can imagine that musicians get stage fright. I still do. One that was quite hair-raising was Barry Hearn, because I was going up to Matchroom. I already had to call off once. I woke up the morning I should have done it the first time with some sort of horrible stomach bug, and it wasn't one of those where you think, oh, should I go or not? There's no way I could have gone. So I've had to, you know, message him and say I can't come. I think he was a bit annoyed. The second time I went up there, he'd forgotten I was coming. I had 5 pages worth of questions. His secretary rang him, so he's turned up a bit later. And I said, how long have I got? He said 20 minutes.
Wow.
So, and it's in his big office in Matchroom. But as it turned out, I had a little bit more experience then. And once I was there, I was fine. So then I picked my questions and I think it turned out really well. It was punchy, you know, a good interview. But that was that was one where, had it been earlier in my, in inverted
Yeah.
commas, career, I think I would have probably had a nervous breakdown. But as it turned out, it was quite good.
It's a really good one, and he's a real character. And I've watched that a few times, and there's no way you can tell that there was that sort of chaos behind the scenes. It was very smooth. And what about sort of people sort of under the radar? Has there been someone who isn't so sort of well known, so much of a sort of character? Do you meet the lesser known people that have surprised you, and you sort of walked away going, "Oh wow, that was didn't know that would be quite so interesting."
Yeah, I mean, obviously the ones that interest everybody the most and are always fascinating to me are the professional gamblers. So, and some of them I've become quite friendly with me. When I did Shane Revel, it was at the Mayfair, the Mayfair place, and it was at the Mayfair shop. Sorry, and he's just such a nice, likable person. And then last year I was going out to Ireland, and I would have had to get an early flight. And he just, sort of invited me to stay at his house. He picked me up. It was about a 50-mile drive. Picked me up from the airport, stayed at his place, took me back to Dublin the next morning. So I got my flight down to Kerry. There's just so many. Like I said, I've never come away from any interview thinking somebody was a complete arsehole. There was one guy. Am I allowed to talk about other ones? Or
Yeah.
I mean, when I did Terry Ramsden, for example, that was being a person alive in the 80s. I mean, Terry Ramsden was almost a household name, I would imagine. And I won't go into too much detail, but I had a couple of phone calls with him, and I feared the worst. Basically, I thought it was going to be very, very difficult. We did it at the Greyhound Derby at Towcester. And when I actually sat down with him, it was just me and him. He was absolutely lovely. Real nice chap. So that was the nearest I came to thinking, oh no, this is going to be. Honestly, everybody's been, for 300 odd people, I suppose it's pretty amazing, really, that no one's been an absolute sort of dickhead or anything. So
you, I remember it was quite a moving interview you did with John McCririck, and I think you had quite a sort of personal bond with him. Can you talk to me, if you're happy to, about the role you had with his obituary? I understand he proofread his own obituary that you had written for him.
Yeah, well, I worked with John when I was with Turf TV. So I worked with him on the racecourse. We used to give him the price updates and things when I was with Turf TV. And I would say he was a professional. He was very friendly when we were working with him, but I was definitely not his best mate. I mean, once the work had finished, he'd be polite and say hello, but I wasn't like going around his house for tea or anything like that. No. When we did the interview, he was very friendly, very professional. He gave me a rollicking when I started off at the beginning. He said, never start at the beginning, start with something punchy, and then you can work back. And I've always tried to remember that. But I became very friendly with, well, I say very friendly. I'm friendly with his wife, Jenny.
Yeah.
And I got a phone call from her saying, John isn't going to be around much longer, and we need somebody to write a short obituary for our agent to give to the press when he eventually goes. And she's like, I can't ask a proper journalist because they won't be able to help themselves, and they'll break the news. So they'll break the news early. So can you do it? So I was absolutely, sort of quite sort of very sad to hear it, obviously, but also very sort of chuffed they would sort of think I'll be worthy of doing it. So I wrote this, and she said we want it fairly basic. So I wrote it, and I sent it in to her. And she rang me up, and she said, he's gone from being on death's door to sitting up in bed reading and he's corrected it. He wants you to change it. Take that bit out. She said, this needs an apostrophe, and there should be a comma there, and that's too long. And this went back and forth for about 3 times. And then she rang, she said, he's pleased with it. He's very pleased with it now. So that's fine. And they did actually read like a paragraph of what I wrote on, I think, News at 10 or whatever. So it went out, and nobody knew I'd done it, but I knew I'd done it. And it was, I was quite emotional about that, really. I'm still very proud that they asked me. And it was, because, he was somebody that affected everybody's lives in racing one way or another.
And it's lovely to know that, during those sort of last days for him, there was something you gave him a little something to be happy about, a little bit cheeky, and to have that back and forth. So that will always be there.
Yeah.
So So away from your own experience, sort of on the betting people side of things, if we get into the actual sports betting side, so I'm going to dig into how you go about your sports betting, how active you are in that regard now, or back in the day. So, in all honesty, and you don't have to answer, but you can go sports specific or sort of swerve. But do you think you're an all-time winner sports betting?
This is going to be a bit boring for you, really, because at the moment I've sort of pulled the reins in a bit. I've not really been a sports bettor.
Yeah.
I've backed horses for years. I definitely have won over the last 10 years, but none of it's been down to me. My great friend Andrew Mount, he used to he had a tipping service back still when he was working with racecourse bookies, and he wrote the Trend Horses books. And I used to follow. Well, I'll probably get in prison for it now, but I used to put bets on for him. At one point, but with a friendly local who noticed for Andrew, so I suppose it's not quite so bad. And I used to follow him in, and I've literally only just thrown them out. I found them the other day when I was cleaning up. I had all these A4 books of all the bets written down, bets for Andrew, bets for me, and showing a profit. He had a Scoop 6 syndicate, which we had a lot of fun with, won it 3 times. We have missed out on the bonus in the last time we won it. That's when we're in with Harry Finley and stuff. So I won money there. I was following another service. I met I don't know if I mentioned the service. I met the guy, so I knew he was genuine. Putting a lot of bets up a day. I was made money for 4 or 5 years with him. The times I've come unstuck has been my own undoing, because staking, and I know going to Smart Bash, staking is a big thing. The first time with Andrew, I've been traveling in my mid-30s. In around 2000, I had credit cards, so I thought, why would I want to be back in the UK when I've still got a credit card in Thailand or Australia or whatever? So I had accrued quite a bit of debt. I was winning. I think we won 40. I won 14,000, but one year. But a lot of that was to do with the Scoop 6. And I thought I was betting £20 a point, and I wasn't earning all that much money. It was and I didn't have a tank as such. So you can see the disaster. And I thought, blimey, if I'd been betting £40 a point, I could have cleared off all my debt easily. So you know what happened next, don't you? It all went tits up. Andrew had a bad run. Which is inevitable. Everybody has a bad run, but I'd overstaked. So I had to sort of pull up stumps mid-season. Had I kept to levels that I could have afforded, Andrew, I dropped them down to a tenner. I think I clawed a lot of it back. And the other service I was following, similar thing. I'd up my stakes, and I was also following another person, and they had bad runs that met.
Yeah.
So I knocked myself out there. And I knocked out the tank that I had, which is a fair bit for the amounts I was putting on. So I thought, right, you have a tank for a reason. You don't go into other money. So I've sort of pulled up stumps at the moment, but none of it's ever been my own, because the people that have, and some of the people I've met during betting people interviews have marked my card. I had a few good sort of people sort of helping me out. I feel a bit of a fraud because I've never really become a good form student, but on the other hand, I knew that the people that were telling me were spending 12 hours every day, so why would I even try and emulate them? Because I couldn't, the best will in the world. So I've missed out on picking one out and having the joy of being right, but I've only ever really done it to make money. And I've quite often I'd never wouldn't even watch the race. I just, one of the services I use, they'd send a telegram if it was placed or won. So you get the ping and you think, oh, that's handy, But it's never been for fun. It's never been for entertainment. Even when I go to the races, I'm not compelled to have a bet. But it's quite nice when there is one, because you've got that interest. But I wouldn't very, very rarely have a bet just because I'm there or because I'm watching it.
So you had your 10p in the 73 Cup final. But so now, if you're watching something on TV, a big fight, a football match, rugby match, you have a few quid, or you just watch it?
Well, I've got 2 children, 9 and 5.
Yeah.
And we're much more likely to be watching Ben and Holly's adventures than any sporting event. I've also got a wife that's not interested She wouldn't want to sit down and watch a football, so we don't. Basically, I'm sorry. I know for the context of this interview, that's not very interesting. But we just. I can't remember the last time I watched a live sport event apart from racing.
Yeah.
But I've always been a racing person. I've never, when I was a kid, I supported Sunderland for years after that 1973 thing. But I've always been racing as well. So on Saturdays I'm at the races. I've always been a racing person as opposed to a sports person.
And I think, weren't you on course when Frankie got the Magnificent Seven? You must have been tempted to have some of that 25,000 to 1.
Do you know what? It's I remember it very well. Before racing, I'm sure it was Tomo had Frankie up on a podium at the front of the track, and he was interviewing him. And I thought at the time, he said something positive about every horse. But it's the Festival of British Racing, wasn't it? I think it was the Festival of British Racing at the time. And I do remember thinking he's given every one of those a positive mention, but I was working for bookmakers. We're far too professional to have mug bets like accumulators, But in hindsight, obviously, and there were people around us that I know. Richard Pittard had won a nice few quid. He was one of the bookies. He'd done, but I think in his case it was more a bit of insurance in case Frankie did have all the winners, because he was obviously at that time, even before he did that, he was very popular with the punters. Like earlier in my life, Leicester Piggott, which one's Leicester on? It'd be which one's Frankie on. So but it was we actually cheered at him home, even though Dave Phillips I was working with did his absolute conkers. We realised we'd witnessed something, and we cheered him home, and a lot of the bookies cheered him home. I know there's all sorts of stories about what went on at the top end of the rail and all that, but it was, to be there, it was quite amazing, really.
Incredible.
One of those days,
Yeah, nothing comes close to that. So you, one thing that we do ask people who come on this show is if they've suffered from account restrictions. So if you're not really actively betting, is that something that you experience?
Oh yeah, but because when it first happened, would have been around 2006, 2007, and Andrew was flying. I was back in his, and I couldn't work it out. I rang up, I can't remember the firm there, but I rang them up, and I'm like, "What's all this about?" I'm only trying to have £20 on, and that was the first. It actually came as a genuine. I couldn't understand it, and then obviously it's become more and more prevalent. I was winning, even though I was chipping away, having but literally £20 and £40 when it all went tits up. But betting in those sort of levels, I did let Andrew play with a couple of my accounts before that, which obviously he ruined them because he was. I don't know if anybody remembers the data modeling ratings that used to come out. You come out at 9 o'clock, and they had a sliding scale of pricing. So if you got up at 9 o'clock, it cost you a score, and I think you could get for £1 by about 1 or something like that. But Andrew had a really good system with those ratings, and he was betting one of the firms that would price up forecasts at their current prices. And Andrew was chopping it off on that, and I suppose it was quite obvious to that firm that it was a pattern, and we weren't sophisticated enough to try and disguise it. So there's a few of the accounts that went not for my shrewdness, but because he's very clever. And all the accounts went eventually. I've only got a couple left, but of course, I've noticed though. I think there must be some sort of time limit because I did get one back, so I think I'm probably due to try and get some back. And I'm not out of the game. I'm just taking a breather. But I'm the sort of person that would like 2 or 3, 4 bets a week rather than 20 bets a day. And I find it a bind because with the other service I was using, so they were brilliant. I'm sure they're winning again now. You'd get the message in the morning and I'd stop everything because if you don't get the bets on, you miss the prices and all the rest of it. And that almost became a slave to it, which I didn't like. And then you don't want to miss a day. So if you're on holiday, and the wife and everybody sort of can't leave your flipping phone alone, So I'm more of I'd rather have a couple of bets a week and try and make some money.
I think that's the difference. You said it a few minutes ago, is that when it first happened, you're genuinely surprised that it was happening 20 years ago. It was even like kind of a bragging rights thing that you felt a little bit of kudos that you'd
Yeah.
you've done enough. Yeah, and now it's far from that. But so you mentioned the smart bash, and if you're talking to someone, is there any sort of question you'd ask them that would reveal to you how much you would trust their opinion on sports betting, or is there anything, any sort of telltale signs that you would or you wouldn't ignore?
I mean, to be honest, when I was at Smartback, it was absolutely fascinating to be in a room full of people like that. And I did feel like a fish out of water. I did feel like a bit of a dinosaur. And I definitely felt like the thickest person in the room because I said to Chris in a recent interview I did with him, Jerry Croxford was there, who I love Jerry, and he's an old school, brash, loud greyhound punter who will tell everybody he's the greatest of all time. When I was starting to go the racing, people apart from like Barney Curley was he would have been quite an enigma and quite quiet, but he was still a big presence. He was there with his fedora and he'd walk up and like the fox in the chicken shed. And you got you have people like Johnny Lights that would march around calling in bets over the top of the heads of the. But everybody was like a showman and a big personality. There were lots of them. Even the Tic Tac men were, big person, that sort of thing. And these days, these guys are like the silent assassins, aren't they? They're sort of there and they're, you wouldn't spot them in a crowd, but there they are. And there was hundreds of them that I'm thinking, I was quite annoyed. I a lot of that stuff, when they started talking about crypto and writing Python and all stuff, I was sitting there nodding away thinking I got a nod because otherwise people would think I'm thick, but
you're paying attention to the quieter ones.
Yeah, definitely.
I often hear you say that you say this ridiculous thing about being the thickest person in the room. Like, it's objectively not true. I've like I said, in the research I've done about you, it's absolutely fascinating, and your sort of appetite for putting yourself in difficult situations, going on adventures, getting out of town, getting out of the country when required. You ended up at a barbecue in Australia with the cast of Neighbours or Home and Away or something.
Home and Away, yeah, that was.
It's and also you're an author, a self-published author. So in a room of 100 people, you don't get many of those. So how any more books in the pipeline?
Yeah, I'm 70,000 words into my music adventures. With the working title, it all started with Gary Glitter. So I think, I put up on Facebook actually asking for people to recommend an alternative title for it. And I actually try and publish it. But I was doing I was traveling with bands and putting bands on stuff all through when I was working with the bookmakers, in the 90s and whatever. So I've done a few quite interesting things. And so I've written all that down. I'm a bit conscious that my mum's probably going to read it, but I'm afraid it's going to have to be warts and all because the music people are going to want the true stories. But
those are all CDs behind you, right?
Yeah, nobody wants them anymore. They're a decoration now, aren't they? I got a fair bit of vinyl as well. I buy vinyl these days. But the CDs, I need recommendations for ripping them all onto something, and then I can store them away. But my late dad made the things to go in, so I'll probably be keeping them up. But they're mostly obscure 50s or that sort of thing.
Is it alphabetical, chronological, quality?
It was sort of alphabetical, actually, sadly. But when we moved house, it all went in boxes, and they've literally come out. And that's a job when I'm not so busy because like the 50s stuff I've got, there's loads of information about now the long dead artists and all that. So more of a reference. A lot of the other stuff like Green Day and Offspring and that, they're just totally worthless. So I'll have to go through once I've ripped them all onto a suitable device.
Offspring, I hope you're saying they're worthless in the value of the CD rather than the quality of their music.
Oh no, I love the music. I love Green Day and I love Offspring, an Australian band called The Living End that I went on tour in California with. They're massive over there, but people don't really know them much over here, even though they play Reading Festival and that.
Oh,
Yeah,
they're still producing some bangers these days, even.
I've just got their new album actually on vinyl. I put it in amongst all the others. I can't find it.
Oh, right.
I've not even played it yet.
I bought my girlfriend a record player last year. Like, do you think you have to spend a fortune to get a decent sound out of vinyl records?
No, I was somebody recommended me one. I think I paid about £300 for it. I got a couple of old speakers, but they're quite good old speakers. And I think I probably paid about £1 for the whole lot all in. It's probably enough.
Yeah, nice, good, okay. I could talk to you about music for a long time. We could do a separate one on that. So, when do you think you last placed a bet with a high street book?
Oh, blimey! I was putting a bet on for somebody else, and that was in Towcester, and it was a 25-1 shot. I think it went off at about 7-2 and got beat about a head.
Ooh,
that was
okay.
I don't go in bookmakers really.
Yeah. Okay. So I sort of touched upon your adventures. So this is sort of a two-part question. I want to sort of understand what you would advise your younger self. Now, I know you've worked in the slaughterhouse. You were in the army for 3 or 4 years. Spent a lot of time in Germany.
Most of it is in Germany. Yeah.
I was born in Munster. My father was in the army. So then you went to Australia spontaneously. Got to see the Melbourne Cup. Then you know, these are all very sort of diverse and curious things to have done, and like complete spontaneous decision making, reacting to the situation you're in at the time. But like, having done all these diverse things, what would you have said to yourself back then as a sort of 15-year-old, given what you know you would go on to achieve?
Well, I would have worked harder at school, but I'm quite pleased with the way things worked out. I mean, I was quite clever at school, but I think the kids of the 70s had no chance because the Beano and the Dandy, all the characters you wanted to be, like Dennis the Menace, or the Bash Street Kids were anti-school, and the Swats were the ones that you didn't want to be like. Grange Hill, everybody wanted to be Tucker Jenkins, and not one of there wasn't any kids that worked there. Was a films like Grease, the jocks were all the people that, you know. I think I went through life as a child growing up thinking that anyone that actually worked hard at school and tried was somebody you didn't want to be like. Honestly, I think that's the way us kids were conditioned in the back in the day. Obviously not everyone, because a lot of my peers went on to do well, but there wasn't so much going to university and stuff back when I was a kid. I think I think about this a fair bit, to be honest with you, because there's been lots of times in my life where I thought, oh, you know, you've wasted that, but all of it's added up to where I am now, and I'm very happy now. I'm married with a couple of kids, a job. You know, I'm never going to be rich, but I love what I do, and I do what I love. So I look forward to every single day going to the races and, you know, meeting all these really interesting people. What I would have done is, when I started work on the racecourse, there was like a hierarchy. I worked for Jack Lynn. He was a brilliant bookmaker. He could work in the poor pitches, and they would just using figures in the field, but they would bet overs every race if they could. I know people would scorn at that. They were making proper books, whatever, they would win nearly every race, whatever happened. Very, very difficult to do that. That's where being a floor man with them was good training, because you had to try and earn at every bet. And earning from a bet struck in the back row was very difficult, you know, so that was good. But the hierarchy thing meant that I never even dreamt about approaching the likes of Johnny Lights or some of the other big punters that were there, like Dodger McCartney, or because you thought you weren't worthy of talking to guys like that. Since I've met some of them, now I realise that had I gone up there as a young 18-year-old saying, oh, can you... do you fancy anything today, or can you teach me what? I think they probably would have done. Yeah. But that's the only thing I think really that I regret, because, like I say, everything else has culminated in where I am now. So, you know, a lot of the things I wouldn't, if things had been different, I might have enjoyed my life, but it wouldn't. But I'm enjoying what I've got now. So, you know, and the things the things I've done spontaneously. I mean, I was sat in Sydney and flipped a coin. Should I go back to Thailand, or should I stay in Sydney? I got all the way to Melbourne and rang my mate, who said, oh, we've got you some work. So I literally got off the 14-hour bus, got on the next 14-hour bus and went back up, and that was the best decision I ever made in that context. So it's just, you can't odds it, can you?
That's brilliant. But you talk about sort of like working harder at school or whatever, but actually having that mindset of doing something like tossing a coin and making a decision like that, that's a life sort of experience thing that no amount of working harder will give. You can work, 20 hours a day and not have the sort of freedom of spirit to say, do you know what, I'm going to make this decision and I'm going to go and do this. Not many people would do that. So that puts you in a sort of unique advantage.
Irresponsible, some might say.
Yeah, but is it though? It's adventure, isn't it? And life experience. And so, do you think? So back to the betting industry now. Do you think there's any sort of innovations that the industry's crying out for, without getting too sort of political about everything that everyone's got a downer on at the moment? But is there anything that you think the industry needs?
Well, it's not quite what you're asking, but I think the bookmakers should be more ruthless, as in they should give people more rope. But when I've had accounts, I had an account closed down back when Andrew was flying. He put 3 winners in a row on the all-weather. I think they're like 7-1, 8-1, and 10-1. Phenomenal. 3 days in a row. And rather than being happy about it, he just knew that was going to be your account. And it was purely because it was variance. He was showing a profit, but there was probably 7 losers before and 8 losers after. And I think, like when I've talked about overstaking, I think it's very difficult for punters to be consistently good or win consistently, because everything changes. Everyone you speak to says everything changes. And people, I see these people on Twitter, with their trumpets, and I can't get on. I'm thinking, what really I would like to do is give you a bit more rope. Say, go on then, have a bit more on. I know you can't do that these days. See if you can win this much. Goad them into, show us how clever you are. How big are your balls? See if you can, stop messing around with 20 quid. Have 50s on, and they'd come unstuck. But I know that's not the sort of thing you can do anymore. But there was a bookmaker on course that used to make me laugh. In Metcalf, God rest him, he's gone now. But punter would come up to him and he would say, "Oh, can I have 50 on this one, Ian?" And he'd say, "Have you seen the size of my house?" That sort of thing. I think you could clip the wings of a lot of these people that are that think they're cleverer than they are. But
it would be brilliant PR if some of the books took that. But I think, to sort of roll back a bit, like you've experienced, there are some firms that do reset after a certain amount of time. And certainly I've got some very recreational books that I was restricted on a couple of years ago that now those restrictions aren't so severe. So I'll be back playing with those a bit more seriously soon as well. So I don't know if you've had since we met first in January, if you've had much of a look at my website, the Sharp Betting website. I like to ask my guests if they have seen the site. Is there anything they particularly like about it, or we can skip on to the next question?
I actually got a few quid on the boxing at the weekend, but I told you I'm the thickest person in the room. I spotted the ones that had the positive, but then I thought I misread it. So I thought that some of the lines meant that was the fancy, but it was actually the market, wasn't it? So I did a Yankee on the green lines on some of the outsiders, but then I realised that it was afterwards that I'd made a rick. But I made more on the ACCA that I did with the positive ones on the favourites. So I should be looking at it more closely. And I've signed up actually. I've already signed up for the free thing because I'm a type 1. But I signed up yesterday, so I'm on your books now.
Brilliant.
There's a lot of stuff there.
There's that betting stuff. I think there's something in that. I'm really looking into that the weight of money. It tracks where the betting public are supporting the favourites and the dogs. And sticking some short prices in ACCAs, I think there could be something in that. So something like before we wrap up, what do you spend most of your time on now? Then is it interviews, writing your book? What else are you up to?
Well, the interviews sadly have been cut from the Star Sports funded ones have been cut from one a month. From 1 a week to 1 a month.
Okay.
So I've got more time to do other stuff. Star Sports have been buying more pitches, so I am getting to go racing more, and I love that. Where I love going racing, so there's never any qualms about that. I do pre-race hospitality at Exeter and Wincanton. At least I did last season. Whether they still want me this season, I don't know. But I try and go to the local jumps meetings down here in the West Country. I try and write at least 500 words a day on the book because I'm near the end of the first draft now. But sometimes life gets in the way. But that's one thing I'm trying to do. I write for Racing Ahead, and also I'm doing. I started doing my own Zoom-ins. I've got some music ones as well that I've done a few. And that really is just to keep, because I was never confident doing the interviews, and I've sort of become more confident. So I'm doing them basically to keep my hand in, and also because it's nice talking to the interesting people. And also people forget about you very quickly in this game. So you got to keep yourself, positively out there. And for purely mercenary reasons, I've got very little pension or anything to speak of. So I've got the affiliate links with the independents four independents that have actually employed me in the past, in the hope that you might catch some fish there. But so far, I think that it's very difficult these days with not restrictions, but affordability checks and all that. So I'm not at the moment. I'm definitely not going to get rich on that, but they are there. The affiliate links, like fishing, just in case.
And so that's your your Zoom. What do you call it?
Zooms in.
And is that how are you doing, like one a week, or is it same sort of schedule as the betting people?
Well, I'm trying to do one a week, because I'm only doing one a month for the betting people, and it's different because mostly I know the people already that I'm talking to. They're previous interviewees or friends of mine or whatever. So we just have a chat and talk about a few topics, and I try and get try and get some sort of useful information from people. Chris Fawcett was the last. Your friend, business partner, Chris was the last one, and I've asked him to repeat the stuff he told us at Smart Bash about paddock watching. So I thought it was probably lost on a lot of those guys. Yeah. And I thought that our viewers might glean some, a lot more from it. So it's all good fun. I just I've been very, very privileged to speak to the number of people that I have, and met so many interesting people from under the radar. And I just want to keep that up now. I like keeping the relationships up with people, and just keep in touch. And so, and plus it on Zoom, it doesn't cost me anything to do that. So it's just it's a good fun thing to do. I think I've done 22 now. So
20. When did you start?
I think I did the first one in February when the betting people stopped being a weekly. So whatever that was, I think for this year anyway.
So I think you got 20,000 followers on X, Twitter. So what is your handle? We'll put it in the notes. But what is your Twitter handle?
It's just at Simon Nott. But it's taken me about 20 years to get them. So but they are organic. I mean, that's what I think. Obviously, I've got loads of bots and weird people that follow, but I think there's a lot of organic racing fans on this. So I think there's a fair bit of value, with my with the people that are kind enough to follow me, and so it's all good. Get some good stuff on there if you can fight your way through all the nonsense.
There's a certain amount of nonsense. So okay, so my final question is: if I was going to go and pull up a album from the 90s, one album to listen to this morning, what do you recommend?
Absolutely, it's a 1998 album, The Living End by The Living End. My favorite band. It got me. It's an Australian punk stroke rockabilly band. I was going for a pretty bad time when that album came out. Various things had happened. And listening to that album, it was almost like the guys had written it for me, some of the songs. There's a song called Fly Away on there. I was 35. I listened to that album, listened to that record, and decided to just do it. Leave the council flat I was in, leave everything, sell what I had, and just bugger off. And I took off and ended up having a fantastic year away. And I've still got great friends 25 years later, and actually went on tour with that band, and I'm friends with that band now. So Living End by The Living End.
I've never heard of that. You answered that without even a second's thought. I'm going to go and listen. I'm going to put it on now. And if you never see me again, you know why.
Listen to Fly Away first.
Well, that's what the
whole album's a banger.
Brilliant. All right, Simon. That was really good fun. I could talk to you for a lot longer. We've done 45 minutes, so we'll wrap it up. And hope to see you soon.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, David. Cheers. Bye.